we've been talking about Cistercian charism, and primarily a charism is a gift. It's a gift directly from God to us. And there are many charisms, but the charisms that we mainly think of are the gifts of the Holy Spirit, and especially the gift of wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, which are the contemplative gifts of the Spirit. Now, looking at it in a larger perspective, you folks are here in a organized manner. You have signed a paper which attests to the fact that you wish to be a member of a group that is connected with a monastery, which is connected with an order, which is approved by the church. And being connected with this monastery then connects you with the church, the organizational church, the Catholic Church. And so you might say that your charism in some way is connected with the Catholic Church. And I believe, as I said before, that it is part of the movements that are being given by the Holy Spirit to the church at this time in history. Now, part of being a lay Cistercian contemplative is this very fact of being contemplatives. And that is your charism. Your specific charism is to be contemplative. And it has been said that the contemplatives are the heart of the church. So this big organization, which is the Catholic Church, does have a heart of people who are given over to prayer. Our charism is in some way connected with prayer. Prayer for the church, prayer for the world. And so, being members of this institution, this monastery, which is the heart of the church, you yourselves now are in some way connected with the whole church. You are interested in the church and what happens in the church. Now, there has been seismic changes in the Roman Catholic Church in the last 50, 60 years. Huge movements, which you might say, they're like the seismic shifts that are happening underground with in the world, in our earth. I haven't heard much talk about these great shifts, but they're huge, and they begin certainly with the Vatican Council. They were picked up by Paul VI, expanded by John Paul II, and you might say really blossomed under Benedict, and now they are absolutely flowing from Pope Francis. And if you want to put it down in one word, it is the word mercy. And the word mercy in this seismic shift is that the church is seeing itself as an instrument of mercy being used by God to the whole world, to all humanity. Beginning with the Vatican Council, there are expressions like the Holy Spirit is in the life of every single human being in hidden ways that we know not how it works. Expressions like that all humanity is being called to the same end. That Jesus, because of his incarnation, has a relationship to every single human being, and every single human being has a relationship to him in some way. So it's talking about this great reality of the incarnation, God coming into this world. And through this incarnation, he is manifesting the mercy of God. And by manifesting this mercy, opening up the church to all humanity. Now, Pope John Paul asked that his theological commission study the question of what happens to a baby who dies without baptism. Now, that is a big issue when you think about it. What happens to a baby who dies without baptism? Now, his theological commission studied it for a year, and he told them to go back and study it more. He did it another year, then he died, and Pope Benedict picked it up and asked his theological commission to continue to study the subject. They did it for another 2 years, and then finally, Pope Benedict said, now it is ready. Your document is ready to be published. And he approves of what is said in this document. Now I'm going to give you all a copy of the really important issues that are brought up in this document. But what the document ends up saying is not just what happens to a baby who dies without baptism, what happens to anyone who dies without baptism. And with the conclusion that they come to, it's obvious that because Pope Benedict wished to publish this, that he is interested in this subject, and it comes out to be universal salvation. Pope Benedict definitely, since he was a young man, a theologian, teacher, he was interested in the subject of universal salvation. His best friend, Van Balthasar, was also interested in the question of universal salvation. And it's very clear from what Pope Benedict said on many occasions, he sees the redemption that Jesus brought to this world was universal. It included every single human being, and that at the end of time, after the final purification and judgment, all humanity will be where they were intended to be by the Creator at the beginning, in union with God in heaven. Now he makes this Benedict makes this most clear, besides being in this document, but most clear in his encyclical on hope. In the encyclical on hope, he says that there is an intermediate period between death and resurrection and judgment, where every single human being is purified by Christ. And he says that the purification consists, he says, some modern theologians say that the purification consists in the gaze of Jesus. Jesus looks at us and burns away all that is false, that is not our true selves. And so that after this purification, we are just what God wanted us to be. Now, the modern theologian who said this was Joseph Ratzinger. He was quoting himself, which I think is very sweet. But he says, now this is a burning, but it is a sweet burning. It is evidently an experience of Jesus just looking at us and we knowing him and he knowing us. So that if we have all been purified before our judgment and resurrection, then naturally it's a favorable judgment if he has purified us. So that's his explanation for universal salvation. He doesn't call it that. I'm calling it that, but that's what it is. If everyone has been purified by Jesus before their judgment, what can it be but a positive judgment? And this is extremely, extremely comforting. I'm sure we have all experienced friends and relatives and acquaintances. Oh, how could God possibly send a whole bunch of people to hell? And if God is kind and merciful, how can you believe in a God that would punish you and send you to hell? A lot of those arguments are justifiable, and this is where I think that Pope Francis is coming in, beginning with John Paul. John Paul instituted Divine Mercy Sunday, the first Sunday after Easter, Divine Mercy Sunday. And then Benedict continued the devotion of Divine Mercy. And now we have Pope Francis, who is calling for a Jubilee year. And a Jubilee year is a very formal thing. It starts with the opening of the holy doors of the basilicas of Rome, beginning with St. Peter's. And he's calling these holy doors the doors of mercy. And he wants all the cathedrals of the world to have a holy door open and calling the doors of mercy. He has the most positive image of Almighty God and the church, God working through the church as a hospital. We are here to mend the wounds and the suffering of humanity, excluding no one. he says to it just came out this week, no, it was last Sunday, he ordained a group of priests, and he told them, now don't walk around like peacocks, and if anyone asks you to baptize their baby, no matter who they are, baptize them. If they ask to be baptized, baptize them. You know, today it's very difficult to get the sacraments. If you want your baby baptized, you better be a very good practicing Catholic, and you better be in church every Sunday, and your godparents better be there, and you have to be part of the Catholic community. You know, there was great emphasis in the Vatican Council of the community, the praying community, the worshiping community. And it was brought to such an extent that, you know, you're outside that, then you don't get the sacraments. Well, anyway, Francis is coming along and saying, no matter who comes, if they're asking for baptism, don't refuse anybody, which is a manifestation of divine mercy. If somebody comes looking for mercy, give them mercy. And in the confessional, do not be severe, be merciful. And that's the great shift that has taken place in the Catholic Church. And Francis goes so far as to say that our credibility is on the line as far as mercy is concerned. The world is not going to believe us if we don't show mercy, if we're showing the opposite of mercy, if we are being severe and have this face that we are the elite chosen people of God, that we are the elite apostolic historical church that has come down through the centuries. And if you don't belong to us, then it is sad. The image is totally different. And the great difference that goes beyond our church is the respect that the Vatican Council tells us to have for all religions. And to see this document from the Vatican Council says that the Holy Spirit is in every single human being. And if the Holy Spirit is in every single human being, he is in these different churches, these different denominations. There is the goodness and the truth that we have to respect in all religions. There's no question that the Quran has some very, very inspiring passages. There's no question that our scriptures have very, very inspiring passages. But our scriptures also have some very, very tough passages, especially in the Psalms, where it tells us to take our enemies' babies and dash their heads against a rock. Now, fortunately, we say that in the middle of the night when nobody hears us saying it, singing it. But it's there. I mean, those Psalms are tough. And just as the Quran is tough. The Quran says, go out and kill your infidels. Well, our dear St. Bernard, he went all over Europe preaching the Second Crusade and said, men of France, go down, leave your families, leave your homes, go down and kill those infidels. You know, we used to burn heretics as if they were bales of straw. We had a principle that error has no rights, and including the right to life. So if somebody was in error, we did not hesitate, and the big thing in Europe was to burn the heretics in the city square, where all the people would come out and watch the heretics being burned up. Joan of Arc. We did it, and it's to our shame, and that's why I'm saying that the Vatican Council was a seismic shift in the lower underground. Our history is embarrassing, and somewhere along the line, something happened that turned our thinking around. No longer would anybody say that error has no rights. No longer would we say that the heretic has no right to life. Well, what happened? The Muslims are still saying that they have to kill the infidel because the Quran tells them to. What happened? Europe, we did it too. We killed the heretic. We killed the infidel. They had no rights. What happened? We had an enlightenment. And the Enlightenment came to a peak after the Second World War, when the United Nations was formed, and Mrs. Roosevelt helped formulate those universal human rights, where that all people had human rights. And we didn't believe that at one time. People who were not members of our church did not have rights, including the right to life. So we are in a tremendous period in history. We are at a point where we have respect for universal human rights. We are in a period now where I think we can hear the church say that Jesus came and saved all mankind, that universal salvation is a possibility if after purification, and let's face it, some people need to be purified according to their historical actions. But there is the possibility of purification. Jesus, you might say justice. Justice demands it. But is it forever? Is it infinite? Does it come to an end so that the goal for which all of us were created, to be in union with God, can be fulfilled? Now, this is exciting moments in history, and I think that all of us should be aware of all this excitement that's happening in the church, because you are now part of the institutional church. It's more than a parish. You have your parishes, but now you've signed a paper that joins you to a monastery, which is part of an order, which is part of the larger church. And you folks are all praying for all of that. And certainly to pray for universal salvation is certainly a noble